Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today we're doing another installment of my little series where I recommend books to you based on aesthetic. So if you've seen one of these videos before, you'll know, but basically what I'm doing is recommending books to you based on a certain aesthetic or vibe, and to go along with the book recommendation, I make a little mood board because I really like having something visual alongside a book recommendation. I just think it's a fun way to do it. Today's theme is Gothic and possibly haunted estates, which is maybe not super specific, but I feel like you get the idea. And I have a stack of books that I feel like fit that vibe quite well. They do vary a bit, like some are mysteries, some have some supernatural elements to them. It's a real mix of different kinds of things, but all of them have like a gothic feel or a gothic vibe to them, and they all have some sort of house or estate that is a big part of the story. And I really like these kinds of books. I feel like having this kind of like estate or house that's at like the center of a story really adds a lot of atmosphere to it. We're going to start with a book that thoroughly creeped me out when I read it last year. It's The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. This is historical fiction horror, and it's set in Victorian times, and it starts off with us meeting our main character, who is a young woman who has just married this handsome man. And they come from quite different backgrounds, so she feels like this will be a sort of step up for her in life. But then, weeks after they got married, the husband dies, which is obviously tragic. And our main character is sent to live at his like estate, which is out in the country, and her only companion to go with her is like her dead husband's weird cousin. And obviously it's not great, but she thinks like maybe going to this house will still be a good thing. But then they get there and it's not good. Everything with the house and the village by the house is just a little bit off. Like, the local villagers are kind of hostile and the servants are a little resentful and kind of weird. And then one day our main character goes up into the attic and she finds these like wooden companions, and weirdly the first one that she finds actually looks quite a lot like her, which is obviously creepy. But then things get worse when these wooden companions start appearing everywhere throughout the house, and no one really knows who put them there. And in the beginning everyone's like, well, it's just a joke, but then it seems like maybe it's not, and then people start dying. I'm one of those people who's quite easily frightened, so this may not be super scary to everyone, but it was like the perfect amount of horror for me, and it was actually quite like scary and very tense, and I just couldn't stop reading it. It was very interesting. It's definitely spooky and it's very atmospheric, and I feel like the vibe is like dark and sort of foggy. Like, I picture this state in like perpetual fog, and it's always like overcast, I feel, and a little gray. The companions are also very creepy. I couldn't find a photo that fit exactly like how I pictured them for myself, but they are really something. And I do feel like the whole atmosphere of this book is just impeccable. And I think that the buildup of tension throughout the book is done so well. Secondly, of course, we have to include The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which is a classic horror novel. And if you haven't read the book, you may have seen like an adaptation of it, because I think there are several adaptations of it around. I've never seen any adaptations because you can imagine how scary I would find seeing like a horror series or a movie if I get creeped out just by, or actually scared by just reading a book. So I've never seen any adaptations, but I have read the book and it's really good. The story is set in a place called Hill House, not surprisingly, where 4 people gather. We have a doctor who is basically like an occult scholar who investigates the supernatural. We have his assistant. We have quite a fragile woman who is like a guest of the doctor who has experienced supernatural things before. And then we have the heir of the house itself. And they're kind of there to see what's going on with the house, and it doesn't take long until they start experiencing some weird events and things get a little spooky. I have heard that the book is like way more manageable when it comes to the horror than a lot of the adaptations. I haven't seen any of the adaptations, like I said, but I think that the horror in the book is quite like okay. It kind of makes sense to me because the horror in the book is kind of vague sometimes and sort of up for interpretation, which I really like. I feel like it adds a lot of tension to the book, but I think maybe if you do an adaptation, you want it to be a little bit more out there. Now, the mood board for this will need to have like a dark vibe, again, kind of gothic, and just the story has a kind of unsettling vibe. And although it's really hard to sort of show that off visually sometimes, I feel like the horror in this book is very much like the kind of thing you see in the corner of your eye, but then you turn around and it's gone. Like, that's the vibe of the horror in this book. And you sort of begin to question if you're insane or not, which is kind of like its own kind of horror. Next, I'm including a book that I actually just finished a few weeks ago. It's Starling House by Alix Harrow, which is a horror fantasy set in this small town that is kind of run down and is only famous for this author who used to live there. And she built this house before she disappeared. And everyone in the town now knows that this house is like a place that you stay away from because there is something really off about it. There is someone living there though. There is a lonely Eyre who never comes out and he never comes into town and no one really ever sees him. And everyone is just in agreement that this is a place that you stay away from. And our main character also feels the same. But she's also inexplicably drawn to this house, and then through various events, she ends up actually getting a job there. And she takes it despite some reservations, and like everyone warns her to stay away, and she agrees that she should, but she also can't stay away. And from there, we sort of go into the story and the history of the house, and the things that appear there are a big part of the story, and it's a lot about the people who have spent their lives in this house and trying to keep these things from escaping, and the main character is linked to all of this in a way that she slowly but surely sort of unearths throughout the story. The gothic vibes in this one are immaculate, and the house is kind of like its own character in a way, which I really liked. The whole atmosphere of the house and the town is really great as well. It feels dark and a little gritty, and the story has like a fairy tale horror vibe to it that I really liked. There's also a mysteriously appearing mist that adds a lot of atmosphere to this, and I thought the writing in this was great. The way the setting and the characters was brought to life was just excellent, and I really enjoyed it. And like the vibes were just so good. Then we have one that has a little bit of a different feel to the setting. It's You Should Have Left by Daniel Kehlmann. And in this one, I feel like the gothic vibes are more that it has a remote setting and it's a very unsettling book and there's a lot of unease in it. The house feels a little bit more modern though, at least the way that I pictured it, and the story follows a writer who is chronicling 7 days that he stays in this house with his wife and child. The house is set in the mountains of Germany, and throughout the book, and also reading this writer sort of chronicling his experience, things just get very strange, and like he gets lost in the house sometimes, and all of them are plagued by nightmares, and then things just go completely off the deep end. This is a novella, so it's quite short, and there is also a movie adaptation of this one, but I haven't seen it. The house is a big part of the story, though, and it just feels like it's pretty, but again, there's something off about it. It's a really creepy, very psychological story, and it's actually perfect to read in one sitting, I feel, and it's a little trippy, and it kind of feels like a dream, but I really liked it. Next, we have a book that is set in what I picture to be like an old grand stone building, which is specifically a school in this one. It's Madam by Phoebe Wynne, and you know I love a good academic setting, so it wasn't difficult for me to get into the vibes of this one. It's set at this 150-year-old place overlooking these cliffs in Scotland, which is like, you can't get a better setting than that. Our main character is a new teacher at the school though, and this school actually hasn't hired anyone new in over a decade, so it's a really rare opportunity. And although this school is sort of shrouded in mystery, it is famous for its prestige, so this is like a great opportunity for her, so she decides to go. This is an all-girls school and she's there to teach classics, but it doesn't take long until she realizes that something is very weird about the school, and she keeps asking questions and no one will like give her a straight answer, which makes her even more suspicious, which let me tell you, she should be. The setting of the school adds a lot of atmosphere to this, and we're in like windy Scotland by the coast. It feels very isolated, it's stormy and a little gloomy, and it kind of feels like the sun never shines there, if you know what I mean. I will say this probably isn't for everyone. It follows a main character that you may not always like, and it's on the slower side, but if you're into like gothic, dark academia vibes, I think this might be worth the read. It is slow though, so if you're not into slow books, you might not like it. We have another school in this next one, kind of. It's The Broken Girls by Simone St. James, and this has two timelines, both of which center around this place called Idlewild Hall in a small town in Vermont, and the place is rumored to be haunted. The vibe of this whole book is excellent, and it's perfect for like fall and winter, and it will just suck you right in. Now, this school is like a boarding school for unwanted girls, so like troublemakers and illegitimate children and girls who are too smart for their own good. And one of the timelines is set in 1950, where we meet four girls who are all 15 who are staying at the school and their roommates until one of them mysteriously disappears. And then the other timeline is set in 2015, where we meet a journalist who is obsessed with the death of her sister, and her sister was found in like the fields outside of what is now the ruins of this school. So we're following both the story of these girls in the 1950s, and we're in current times with this journalist who is like digging into the past of the school and like discovering secrets, both old and new. Again, I imagine this is like an older type of building surrounded by fields, and a lot of this book takes place in like autumn and winter, so that's like the weather that I'm picturing. It feels kind of run down though, even in the 50s, and I pictured it like overgrown and kind of eerie and just kind of gray and a little lifeless. This is such a good read though. It's a great mix of like mystery and horror and some pretty spooky stuff. And I think the story weaved together all of this beautifully, and it has a lot of interesting characters, and it's just so good. I still think about this book a lot, and you really feel like you're unraveling a mystery when you're reading and sort of peeling back the layers. Then we have more mystery with The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, and to be fair, it has been a good while since I read this book, so I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details, but I do remember that I really liked this and I loved the setting of it and like the house that we see in here. This follows a woman who comes across this ad where someone is looking for a live-in nanny, and the pay is like staggering. So it's an opportunity that's too good to pass up, so she goes and she arrives at this house in the Scottish Highlands, and it's a very luxurious home, and it's like a smart home, so technology is fitted all throughout the house. Now, we actually get this story from the main character as she's writing it from prison, so you can probably imagine that something horrible happened in this house. Now, I remember I really liked the sort of contrast between this modern house, but it's set in the Scottish Highlands, and that mix was just really cool to me. I remember thinking that the mystery was really suspenseful and creepy, and I feel like this author can be a little bit of a hit or miss for people, and for me as well, but I think that this might be my favorite that I've read by her. I do think she's really good at creating atmosphere and like tension, and there's definitely a lot of that in this book. Another creepy book we have is What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher, and this is actually a novella, so you can read it pretty quickly, and even though it's short, it does pack a punch. You may know that T. Kingfisher is one of my favorite authors. I love her. I love all of her stuff, but I do really like her horror stuff as well. And the setting of this one is like particularly creepy. So the story follows a retired soldier who gets word that their childhood friend is dying, so they race to the ancestral home of the Ushers. So yes, technically this is like a retelling. And they get there and it's just like a nightmare. The house is overgrown and the lake next to the house has gotten all like dark and weird. And you know how lakes look when they're just like overgrown and nasty and kind of like dead. Like, that's the vibe of this lake. And the animals around the house are all acting very weirdly. And then they meet their childhood friend, and she is having a really hard time. She's sleepwalking, and she's speaking in tongues, and everything is just very off. All of this creates a very dark and gothic atmosphere, and again, it's very unsettling, and just like everything is overgrown and it's being taken over. And there are several scenes in here that also take place at night, and it feels like, again, it's the kind of vibe where even though it's not night all of the time, it feels very like gloomy and dark and like it's overcast all of the time. We also need some mushrooms and fungus in here because that plays a big part in this book. I really enjoyed reading this though. It's eerie and dark and just sort of deliciously dark in a way. That's probably a weird way to describe this book, but that's how I felt. This is the first book in a series as well. I haven't read any of the other ones, but I do have them on my TBR, and I'm very excited to read them because this first one was just, it was really good. Then we're back with some mystery, but this one is pretty wild, and it's a book that I recommend all the time because I just think it's so good. It's The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. And this is kind of like a complicated one, and it's the kind of book that just throws you straight in and you just kind of have to figure it out. But once you get into it, it's so good. It's complicated, but good, and it really like takes you for a ride. The story is set at this estate where our main character is stuck in a time loop. So he relives the same day over and over. And at the end of the day that he keeps reliving, a woman named Evelyn Hardcastle is murdered at the end of the day. And he is basically told that he gets 8 days to try to figure out who kills her. And if he can do that, he gets out of the time loop. Now, he doesn't wake up in his own body, though. He wakes up in the body of all of these other people who are at the estate, and all of them are suspects, and he has to try to figure out who does it. And, like, he can wake up in the murderer's body, and he gets all of these different bodies to wake up in, and some of them are more helpful than others, shall we say. This book is just wild, but I think it's done really well. And although this huge house is very lavish, our main character is also stuck there, so it does feel a little bit creepy. I picture a huge estate though, and again, sort of foggy. I feel like I'm adding a lot of fog to a lot of these because it just fits, but I feel like I remember there being some actual fog in this one. The house adds a lot of atmosphere to this though, and it's a fantastic backdrop for a wild story. Now, I don't want to give too much away here, but if you've read the book, I feel like the mood board makes sense in a way, and if you haven't, I just really recommend this book. You have to have the brain capacity for it, so just bear that in mind, but it's a lot, but it's just so good. And once you get into it and you start realizing what's happening, it's just amazing. And it has some really unexpected twists. Second to last, we have a book that again I read not too long ago. It's The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. And this one is like gut-wrenching, but it's such a good book. And I think about this book all of the time. And I think I will do that for a long time. Like, this is one of those books that I think is just gonna stick with me forever. This one is set in Florida in 1950, where this 12-year-old boy gets sent to a reformatory school because he gets into a scuffle with the son of this rich white landowner. And we are in the middle of like Jim Crow South, and this school is like a terrible, terrible place, and it's made even more terrible by the ghosts that haunt it, specifically the ghosts of boys who have died there. And our main character can see them, and it's just, there's horror coming from all sides in the story. The story is in part about him and his time at the school, but it's also in part about his sister who is trying to get him out of there. So it's sort of split into two. Now, I think what makes this such a great horror book is that it's such a good mix of like real life horror and supernatural horror, and I feel like the supernatural stuff is more there to highlight the real life horror, if you know what I mean. The atmosphere is impeccable though. You get a really good sense of the place and just how actually scary it is. I especially loved reading about the 12-year-old main character. Like, his perspective just I had to keep reading because I needed to know what was going to happen to him, but I also kind of wanted to look away because the things that happen along the way and some of the things that he experiences are just, it's so horrible. But then you can't look away. The characters also just really feel like real people, and you end up really caring for them. It is a little bit of a long one, but it's definitely worth a read, and it's kind of like chilling in several ways. Lastly, at the end, of course, I have to include Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. And when I tell you that the mood board for this will be easy to make, I could probably make 10 different ones and still want to make more. And I think a lot of people have like a mental image of this because it's just such an atmospheric read. We all probably know what the story is about by now, but basically it tells the story of orphaned Jane, who grows up very lonely in the home of her aunt, and when she gets older, she finds a job as the governess of the young ward of a man named Mr. Rochester, who lives at Thornfield Hall, which is an excellent name for where he lives. And when she gets there and gets to know Mr. Rochester, some feelings start to develop, but then at the same time, the more she spends time at Thornfield, the closer she gets to uncovering a great secret in the house. The vibe of this is quite dim to me, like we need candlelight and of course a little bit of fog. I really should have named this video Foggy Estates. It's really an ongoing theme in here, but oh well, we're just gonna go with it. I love this book though. It's one of my favorite classics of all time and one of my favorite books of all time. Like there's a reason that so many people love it. I also think it's the kind of book where the more you read it and reread it, the more you get from it, which really reminds me that I should reread this book because it's been a long time. That was the last book on my list for today though. All of these books are just very atmospheric and there's gothic vibes in them, and I just love these kinds of books. And actually, if any of you have any recommendations for books that fit this kind of vibe, I would love to know because I feel like I should read more of them, because whenever I do, I always end up really enjoying them. And I feel like I haven't read enough like haunted house stories, and I really should. I probably don't need more books added to my TBR, but whatever. If you have any recommendations, feel free to leave them in the comments. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!